The Rude Awakening Show.
Right now, back on the show with us, Robert Mazur. Good morning, Robert.
Good morning. How are you?
Pretty good. How you doing?
Fine, thank you. And thanks for letting me share time with you and your listeners.
Well, listen, I appreciate your time. It's always great to have you on. I remember your first book was awesome, and I'm expecting great things out of this one, too.
Well, good. I hope you enjoy it.
All right. We're talking about the new book. Robert wrote The Infiltrator, but this book is called The Betrayal. So real quickly, for folks who may not be familiar with your story, who is Robert Mazur?
Well, I'm a retired federal agent, and I did quite a bit of work trying to attack the money launderers that serve the Colombian cartels, and eventually that caused me to accept a long-term undercover assignment as a money launderer, which is the subject of my first book, The Infiltrator. That was an infiltration of the Medellin cartel and Pablo Escobar's organization, as well as a bank called the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, the seventh largest privately held bank in the world.
Let me stop you one question. When you start, I mean, you knew Pablo Escobar, you knew the Medellin cartel, you kind of knew about them. How do you accept something like that? I mean, you have to be in fear for your life immediately, right?
Well, I don't know. I think just like the greatest majority of people who go into the law enforcement career, my goal is to be a part of making a difference. And my view of being a part of making a difference was getting in the trenches and getting as close to the crime as I possibly could to get the evidence that wasn't available in any other manner. And I never wanted to go into management. I only wanted to work the street. And this was an opportunity to get to a point where I could get that evidence that couldn't be obtained in any other manner. I mean, it was mesmerizing for me because I could get information in 5 or 6 meetings that led to the seizure of more than a ton of cocaine. When I was getting information from senior bank officials about where Manuel Noriega's illegal fortunes were being hidden, and I would get information about a series of banks that were, to the rest of the world, appearing to be U.S. branches of banks that were actually controlled by a foreign country and a foreign institution. So, to me, information kind of became my heroin, and I couldn't wait to get the next big piece of information that was actionable in some fashion by the many other people who made this story possible. I'm just one person out of about 250 in the first operation that made that story happen.
So how is it 250 people could keep such a good secret like that? You would think with all those people, something would leak out, or somebody would be able to get to somebody.
I was very concerned about that at the height of the operation, especially because I had clearly gotten information from senior bank officials that one of their favorite clients was the director of the CIA, Mr. Casey, who was using the bank to move money to the Mujahideen and finance their war against the Russians in Afghanistan. So I knew that it was a bank of favor to the intelligence community, and actually one of my account relationship managers at BCCI, his father was the head of the National Police in Pakistan and the ISI, which is their equivalent to the CIA. So I was very, very worried that the goals of the intelligence community might be in conflict with the goals of our criminal investigation and the undercover operation. But thank God it all worked out, and I wound up testifying in that first one before Congress because it appeared as though that there was a premature takedown and a withdrawal of resources from the operation for unknown reasons, which is probably the best bad thing that could have happened for me. It's much better that resources away than anything bad happened to anybody who was working on the case.
So I know you've mentioned this before. You told us last time we spoke. How laundering money, that's just not leaving cash in your pockets when you throw it in the washing machine. It's different than that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, how do you launder money? I'm asking for a friend,
Okay.
Okay. All right. So I'm a drug dealer. I've got all this money. And now what do I do with it?
Sure. Well, there are infinite number of ways in which you can launder money. The best way to first look at it is, if I were to commit the offense of money laundering, what would I need to do? And what I would need to do would be, number one, I would know that the money came from an illegal source, this case drug trafficking,
Okay.
and I would do anything that I could to conceal and disguise the source of the funds. So it could be as simple as buying a big hotel that nobody goes to and bringing that in as alleged cash revenue that came into the business and pumping it through the business. Or it could be a much more complex thing where I was a member of what around the world is known as the black money markets. It's an informal banking system run by corrupt businessmen and bankers.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I got to write that down. What is it called? And do you have any numbers to contact those people? I'm asking for a friend here, Robert. Come on. I have nothing to do with this.
The last guy that the U.S. prosecuted that was a well-known black money market operator, a guy by the name of Aftaf Kanani, who was operating out of Dubai and Pakistan, he was laundering about 14 to 16 billion a year.
Oh.
So that's the kind of professional money launderer that I think our country and other countries need to be trying to attack, because what those launderers do is they bring life to that criminal capital, and they enable those criminal organizations to then corrupt governments, by presidents, by militaries, by anything it is that they want. And we've seen that. Just this last year, we indicted the man who was the Secretary of Defense for Mexico, who happened to be working with the cartels. And we've indicted the President of Honduras and his brother and 10 senators who were there. So these guys are buying up countries, and they are controlling nations in order to be able to pump illegal drugs throughout the United States, Canada, and anywhere they want. Europe is another very, very big market. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out why it is that we have more than 100,000 young people who have died in 2021 from overdoses of fentanyl.
Got it. Hey, I'm just curious. Again, we're speaking with Robert Mazur. He's got a couple books out there. One is The Infiltrator. The new one is called The Betrayal. And have you seen the show Ozarks?
A little bit of it, but it was so far from reality, I couldn't get through the second or third.
Oh, okay. So, damn.
Yeah.
Okay, there goes that idea. Okay. So much for my riverboat.
So don't do what they did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now when you were climbing the ranks and getting closer and closer, to Escobar and the infiltrating this thing, how close did you get to him?
I had a meeting in Paris for several days with his consigliere, the attorney who was his primary attorney and a primary overseer of criminal activity, and his name Santiago Uribe. And I was with him. I was with another guy who was the head of their Air Force. He would buy Rockwell 980s and Rockwell 1000s. These are planes that take off and land in short runways that are bumpy and have long range and heavy capabilities. And they had dozens and dozens of them operating throughout Latin America. So I was with those two guys, and another person who was there kind of in the background was a guy who was one of their principal money launderers and kind of a competitor of mine. So we met there for the purposes of them going over our money laundering methodologies, which they liked a lot, and agreed that they would begin to provide us with chunks of millions to 2 million a day, so that we could put a $100 million nest egg together for them in Europe. Unfortunately, law enforcement decided to get very aggressive about surveillances of those money drops, despite my begging otherwise. And unfortunately, by about the third or fourth money drop, they had so much counter surveillance out there, they picked up on the feds on the street, and then Gerardo Moncada. Your listeners who watch Narcos, the last two episodes of the first year, Gerardo Moncada and Fernando Galeano were the major managers for Escobar, and they were two clients of mine. And Moncada was screaming in the background while my partner was on the phone and saying that I had to be a DEA undercover agent because they saw all that surveillance that was out there. So, and that was a good 3 months before the end of the operation, so I had to do some talking to get out of that.
Holy cow. Man, you're a unique guy. I mean, I don't know how anybody could put up with that.
Yeah.
Really. Give me 1 second here to make us legal. See, we're all legal here.
Yep,
Hold on. Here's
good.
my legal ID, Robert.
WOCM, Selbyville, Ocean City. This is Funky Tuesday. Brought to you by Derrickson Creek Construction.
All right. Again, Robert Mazur with us, author of the new book, The Betrayal. I do want to talk a little bit about this for you, too. The true story of my brush with death in the world of narcos and launderers. Yep, you really had it. I believe you. So the first book turned into a movie. Bryan Cranston played you. Did you and Bryan meet for this role?
Yeah, quite a bit. Yeah. A very, very down to earth, sincere artist, and not only did he spend time with me, but with my wife and with my children, because he truly wanted to try to capture the chemistry of the impact of this on our family, and I think he did a wonderful job.
All right, so now you have a family. Now, where were they at this time when all this is going on?
They were back home, and luckily, my wife has her own profession. She's an educator, and my kids had a lot of activities that were going on. They were gymnasts at a kind of a national level, so everybody was pretty busy. Plus, I had my mom and my dad and my brother and his family who lived in the same town. So they had a lot of support. They needed more, but they did have a lot of support. And so as it got near the end of the operation, last 5 months or so, I was probably gone a month at a time, and I'd be back for a day or so. And my wife, who's a lot smarter than me, eventually said, the day that you're here in between those months is hell. So why don't you just go get this over with, and when it's done, come back and we'll see if we'll still have a life together.
Whoa!
Wow!
And that's what we did. But we had a lot of roots. My wife and I were best friends. She was 16, I was 17. We started dating after that, and other than a year and a half that she dumped me during college, we've been best friends all along. So that really made a huge difference in our ability to deal with it.
Is she available for an interview next week?
No.
Okay. I don't know if she does interviews, because I'd love to find out from that side what it's like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right. So now you were dealing with the between the Medellin cartel and the Cali cartel. Which one's worse, and what's the difference between the two?
Well, they're both lethal. The Cali cartel, which is the infiltration I did under a totally different name, totally different companies, in the betrayal story, much more sophisticated. In their laundering methodologies involve a very complex method that transforms dope money into the appearance of repatriated export revenue. It involves paid-off customs officials and bankers and businessmen who move that money, and I was a part of that group that did that. So they were both very lethal, and certainly the Cali cartel had a lot to do with helping the Los Pepes, the vigilante group, to take down Pablo Escobar at the end. Of course, the reason for doing that is they wanted to corner the market and become the new biggest cartel in the world, and they did.
Robert, when you're scanning the TV channels and movies and stuff, is there a movie that actually depicts it pretty well?
Depicts what aspect? I mean, undercover-wise, The Departed, I thought did a great job. That particular movie, which is really based upon the Irish mafia in Boston and Whitey Bulger.
Yeah.
In that story, I thought that was really done well. Leonardo DiCaprio did a great job as the undercover agent. And then as far as the drug world is concerned, I think that the earlier episodes of Narcos, two friends of mine, Steve Murphy and Javier Pena, who are portrayed in that film by the lead actors, are really the people who deserve the greatest credit for helping to locate and eliminate Pablo Escobar. The portrayal of them and their work, although there's some fictionalization, of course, Hollywood's always going to do that.
Sure.
It's pretty good. It's pretty well done.
So now, when you were doing your job, were you in touch with those guys?
No, I was there before them.
Okay.
I was there at times when people didn't even know really who Gerardo Moncada and Fernando Galeano were.
Okay.
And our operation was one of the first operations to really identify them. At the time that I was dealing with the Medellin cartel, they were going strong. And they had not decided at that stage that they were going, well, Pablo had not decided that he was going to do the internal cleansing, which is what led to Los Pepes, the terrorists. But really, in short order, what happened there was he controlled quite a bit of the Colombian Senate. And some estimates are as high as 80% of the people he was in their pockets, or they were in his pockets. And so he ultimately decided that he was going to build his own jail. By then, I was out, but he built his own jail to avoid going to the United States to face charges.
Right.
He worked a deal with the Colombian government. I'm going to stay in my jail, and I'll serve a couple of years. Actually, it wasn't a jail. It was a nightclub and a mansion and all types of things. Yeah, but then he ultimately, Gerardo Moncada and Fernando Galeano had to pay a war tax. So did all the other people who were sitting on the board. And it started off at $200,000 a year, and then he pumped it up to about $1 million a year. And anybody who gets taxed oppressively decides that they want to hide revenue. So about $23 million was found in what's called a coleta. It's a hole in the basement of an apartment that was jointly controlled by Galeano and Moncada. And when Escobar found out about that, he was especially upset because the lower 6 inches or so of the cash was decayed, which indicated that it had been there for a very long period of time. So he invited them to come to the cathedral, his prison, to talk about this, and decided to have him tortured for a couple of days. And they hung him eventually by their feet, stripped their clothes off, and used blowtorches to melt the skin off their bodies, and then they chopped them up in little pieces and burned them into ash. And nobody's ever seen them since. And then he went after everybody in their families and everybody in their organizations, but he didn't get them all. So the ones he didn't get became Los Pepes, the terrorists who killed anybody who wouldn't cooperate about where it was that Escobar was located, and ultimately they succeeded with some resources from other places and took out Escobar.
Unbelievable stuff. Now, today, in this day and age, would cryptocurrency be a viable way for you to launder money?
It is in some respects. If I was going to there was kind of a famous dark net operation called Silk Road.
Yeah,
where
exactly.
People remember that one. Yeah. Did you have an account there?
I did.
Maybe.
Okay.
Still waiting for money back.
So you could go on Silk Road and you could buy whatever drugs you wanted, because the drug dealers, and these were more, I would say, on the distribution level, lower distribution level, but you could buy all the drugs you wanted, and it'd show up and be delivered to where you wanted it delivered, and you would pay in Bitcoin. There was a particular guy who was a very successful drug seller who was using Silk Road. And about 6 years after those transactions, and Silk Road had already gone down, he went with that Bitcoin to a Bitcoin exchanger. That's where you go to exchange your cash into Bitcoin or Bitcoin into cash. Mm-hmm. Those are kind of like money service businesses. And he claimed that he had mined that Bitcoin, and he wanted his, I think it was about $6 million that he wanted to try to get into cash or to checks. And they did a little bit of due diligence, and there is a very, very rigid blockchain ledger that enables people to be able to determine the genesis of that Bitcoin, which took it back to Silk Road. So they called the cops, and the guy wound up getting arrested and lost his money. So it's got its advantages in some respects. If you're going to be a bad guy and you're going to hack into a bank and you're going to steal money, or you're going to use ransomware and want people to make a payment through the internet, yeah, Bitcoin's probably a good way to go because you avoid the face-to-face stuff. But it does have its problems, and so I would shy away from it. I mean, there's nothing more anonymous than cash. And believe me, when you go to the south side of Chicago and you're looking to sell some drugs, people are not handing you Bitcoin. You're getting 5, 10s, and 20s, and they still have that problem. So, and it's a huge problem. There's no doubt about it. I mean, if you look at the testimony in the El Chapo trial just a couple of years ago, he used to send 3 private jets a month to California that would get stacked with tens of millions of dollars, and then fly that to Tijuana, and then from there, the dirty bankers would take the cash in and get it converted.
Okay, so you know, you talk about the dirty bankers. You remember the scene in Scarface where they're bringing in the bags of money and money, you know, that scene?
I remember. Well, I don't remember that scene, but I know the Scarface movie.
Well, yeah, they came up and they showed up and they brought all the...
Now I remember what you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, is it, you know, I mean, obviously that was very transparent, but I'm saying, is that in almost kind of how it works? Like, you know, they're bringing in these bags of cash to these guys.
Well, you know, you don't have to go back too far the way that they really preferred to handle the cash, and that was that they would smuggle it out of the country now and take it to Mexico. And U.S. banks, like Wachovia Bank, which is now, you know, that was bought by Wells Fargo. Wachovia Bank had no branches in Mexico. They opened these accounts for Mexican-based currency exchange houses, and they wound up managing those out of Philadelphia and Miami. But they received in a period of just under 3 years, $14 billion in currency.
Wow.
And they used armored cars to then drive the currency back to the United States. And in different locations, and especially in San Diego, where Wells Fargo had personnel at a counting house, they counted out that money, and then they put it in as credits to the bank accounts of the houses of exchange, you know, claiming it was legitimate cash that was received, you know, in supposedly in the remittance process, where, you know, migrant workers work in the United States and send money over to Mexico, and they deal those money service businesses deal in cash and American Express wires and that type of thing, which is a lot of garbage. But anyway, so $14 million. Imagine this: $14 million. A U.S. bank arranges
million or billion?
$14 billion. $14 billion.
Yeah.
$14 billion. They arrange armored cars to bring that back into the United States, get it into a bank account. If that was in 20s, and I'm sure it was 5, 10s, and 20s, but if it was in 20s, it would have weighed 780 tons. So you tell me, who in the world thinks that they are getting legitimate 780 tons of currency from houses of exchange, many of them, most of them in the state of Sinaloa, which the Sinaloa Cartel is from?
Yeah.
You know, it's a joke.
Got it. Hey, real quick, I know we got to run on time here, but I wanted to ask you, the book is out, right? The Betrayal, that's out now?
Yes, the book is out. Okay. And the long and short of the Betrayal is that on the surface, the Betrayal is one of the U.S. colleagues of mine who I didn't know was on the take, who outed me to the Cali Cartel as I was working undercover, not just in the United States, but in Panama and Colombia, and almost got me killed. But there's a deeper betrayal to that I reveal in the course of the book, and so in a nutshell, that's what it's about.
All right, and I want everybody to make sure you pick up The Infiltrator as well. You got to get them both. That Al, you'll like it. It's a movie too, so you can watch that movie. And real quick, Robert, what is KYC Solutions? What do you do now?
Okay, KYC is know your customer. So for the anti-money laundering world, I do speaking all over the world. I get the opportunity to talk to tens of thousands of people who are compliance officers in international banks and in other walks of the private sector, as well as law enforcement officers. And I try to share with them the things that I think they need to know about how they can identify bad accounts, how they can identify companies and businesses in geographic areas that are highly involved in money laundering, and how they can protect the reputation of their institution and more importantly, how they can accurately report to the government, as they are required by law, suspicious transactions meaningfully so that we can prosecute these people.
Got it. RobertMazur.com if you want to check out the website, the books, again, The Infiltrator, The Betrayal. Robert, thank you for your time again. It's always a pleasure. You're eye-opening, and I'll be in touch with you later about the other stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no problem. We got your account opening forms here.
Okay. Thanks, Robert. Take care, man.
Okay. Take care. Bye.
Bulldog and the Rude Awakening Show.